Derek is trying to bring about a secular common morality that everyone around the world, regardless of their religion and their personal desires and beliefs and culture, has a reason to sign up to. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was, a recent attempt at something like this. But Derek has pushed this really to a much higher level in terms of looking at fundamental reasons and much more basic concepts that can inform much more fine-grained and sophisticated ways of thinking about what we should do, or what we have most reason to do, is how Derek often puts it. We're trying to apply Derek's ideas, but particularly his way of doing philosophy, to everyday problems and bring it to the public and to policymakers and to other disciplines. So, for example, we work with neuroscientists and psychologists and research ethics committees and doctors. So, in a way, we're a conduit for Derek's theoretical philosophy, but of course we try to make our own small contributions along the way and perhaps elaborate it or refine it. But we're trying to bring those ideas into a much wider circulation and engagement. Now, there are two views of practical ethics, which I've called the missionary position, or the view that we need to campaign for change for the better, that we know what's right, and we need to just convert people to our way of thinking. And that's certainly, Derek had many ideas that he felt very passionately about around climate change. And that model is perhaps best embodied by the philosopher Peter Singer, also my supervisor, about changing the world. Now, that's not my view of practical ethics. I have what you might call the Socratic view, that is about getting people to think for themselves about these issues, getting them to understand and be more sophisticated, but to make their own decisions. So I always say to medical students when I teach them, it's not up to me to tell you what to do in a situation. You'll have to decide for yourself, because the facts are always specific. I don't know the details, and although ethics is not relative to people's desires, it's specific to context. So if you've got a lot of resources, you can afford a lot of freedom. If you don't have resources, you have to restrict freedom. So that doesn't mean that freedom isn't important or that it's relative. It's that we have different values that apply in different contexts. So I see my role is campaigning for thought, for more reflection, for trying to enable a procedural progress rather than trying to bring about a certain outcome. So I sometimes argue for positions I don't personally believe. So I was asked once to write an article for why we should get consent to use discarded organs and tissues from surgery and from medical specimens for research. And I personally don't believe we should have to get consent. But I wrote the article because I think it's important to articulate the arguments. And that's what I think, our role is, to provoke people to think and to be a part of a process where we make a more rational and informed decision about how society moves forward. Yeah, Derek, certainly changed the way that I thought about moral decisions and practical ethics. And I think of it like physics. I mean, Derek often used the analogy of mathematics. He thought that philosophy was like mathematics. But I think physics is a better parallel for practical ethics. Because in physics, if you're trying to work out which way the ball will go, you need to sum the vectors of force. And the vectors push in different directions, and the way the ball is going to go is the sum of those vectors. And in practical ethics, the vectors are reasons. And there are always many reasons that apply to any particular issue. And the reasons differ in strength according to the facts. So the vector of reason in favour of freedom will vary according to the resources that you have. But what we have most reason to do is the sum of these different vectors. So I think this is a very helpful way in trying to work out what we should do. And, actually in my own personal life, I've tried to apply this. We often have emotions and we often have desires about what we want to happen. And in trying to make decisions about my own life, I try to work out what the vector of reasons says and what I think I should do, and then I work out whether I can get my mind around it and whether I can make it happen and whether I can accept it. But I think this dislocation between just trying to derive what you want from how you feel and thinking about it in terms of the reasons for action, I think is the right way to think about practical ethics. This process is really what I've taken away. I mean, there's lots of stuff that, I've parted ways with Derek. I mean, I think his work on meta-ethics is interesting, but it's not really that relevant to me. It's the way that he's approached philosophy and his use of thought experiments to try to dissect what the reasons are that are operative in muddy, confused, everyday moral discourse is a very helpful way, I've found, of trying to think more clearly about what the really important considerations are and what the less important considerations are.